Let's go ahead and get started. Again, so wonderful to be here with all of you today. We're excited to have this meeting to discuss a really fantastic program called the Welcome Corps on Campus on ways that Indiana higher education institutions and others, I know we have others joining us from other states, can engage and support refugee students. Um, Again, feel free to introduce yourself in the group chat. Also, feel free throughout the presentation today to input your questions into the chat, but we'll also have a Q&A session at the end. Um, my name is Claire Holba. I serve as the Director of Policy and Advocacy at an Indiana-based nonprofit organization called Patchwork Indy. We are a 501c3 working to connect and empower diverse communities across the state of Indiana. We have we're proud to sponsor this event with several other guest speakers today. And before I make some of those introductions, I'd like to just go over a bit of our agenda. So we'll do some introductions, speak just briefly about Patchwork, given I know this is our first time meeting many of you today, and then we'll get into the presentation that Laura Wagner will lead today about the Welcome Corps on Campus program. We'll also hear from our guests at Indiana University in Bloomington, and then do some question and answers at the end. So just briefly about Patchwork Indy, we're a 501c3 nonprofit working on three pillars with refugee communities, communities who've come through various pathways of immigration. And most recently, we have become a private sponsorship organization in the state of Indiana through the new federal Welcome Corps program. Our board, I see one of our board members in the audience today, Amanda Bonilla. Our board is representative of the various communities that we seek to serve, representing 5 of the world's main religions, over a dozen nationalities, and just indicates the incredible diversity that we have in our state of Indiana. We work as a private sponsorship organization with diverse refugee communities. Indiana has a long history as a welcoming state. This year alone, we've welcomed over 800 refugees in various cities throughout the state of Indiana. Primarily, there are 3 resettlement cities, but the new Welcome Corps program expands the towns and cities in Indiana that can welcome. And so I know we have a diverse representation of universities and colleges in various cities who I'm sure all of you are already engaged with various resettled communities. But as we're looking at a private sponsorship organization to mobilize and raise awareness about Welcome Corps on campus, we know that universities and colleges are just key partners in this work. Over 2,000 Hoosiers and 50 zip codes have signed up for the Welcome Corps program, and we will specifically get into the iteration of Welcome Corps called the Welcome Corps on Campus. So I would now like to introduce today's speakers. We are joined by Laura Wagner, who is the Director of Refugee Access at the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration. Most recently, Laura was the Senior Program Officer for Integration at Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, where she worked the national network of refugee resettlement agencies to develop innovative and client-centered programs for refugee integration. Today, we will also be hearing from Randy Schrader and Chris Adams of Indiana University in Bloomington about their direct experience with the Welcome Corps on Campus program. IU Bloomington is welcoming its first cohort of students through the program in 2024, so we're grateful to hear firsthand from you both, Randy and Chris. Randy Schrader is the Senior Director of International Student and Scholar Programs and Initiatives, and Chris is the Associate Director of International Admissions Operations. We hope this can be a great conversation today, and so without further ado, I will hand it over to Laura Wagner of the President's Alliance. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. Um, and can you all see my screen? Yes, hopefully. Great. So as Claire said, I am the Director of Refugee Student Initiatives at the President's Alliance. If you're not familiar with the President's Alliance, we are a consortium of over 550 college and university presidents, and we operate at the intersection of higher education and immigration. I am going to zoom in on Welcome Corps on campus as a really specific opportunity for higher ed to engage in refugee resettlement. And really excited to kind of talk to Indiana University Bloomington about the work that they've been doing, but also share some resources on just general engagement in refugee resettlement and the wide menu of opportunities and options there are for higher ed to engage. So what is Welcome Corps on campus? So Welcome Corps on campus is an extension of kind of what Claire was talking about, which is Welcome Corps. And so Welcome Corps is, as Claire said, a private sponsorship initiative that allows everyday Americans to directly sponsor refugees. And Welcome Corps on campus is an opportunity for campuses to participate, serve as resettlement spaces, as well as directly enroll refugee students in their institution. So this is a public-private partnership. It is a program of the U.S. State Department, particularly the Bureau of Population, Refugee, and Migration. And there are 6 organizations that were selected to serve as the implementing consortium. So Community Sponsorship Hub is the lead organization. So they are taking the lead of coordinating and implementing the program as a whole. ECAR, Every Campus a Refuge, which some of you may be familiar with, is providing the training and support for campus sponsor groups. IIE, again, which many of you may be familiar with, is coordinating the placement of students, so coordinating between the student and the institution to make sure there's the best fit and match. NASH, which is the National Association of Higher Education Systems, along with President's Alliance, where I am based, is in charge of mobilization and awareness building about the program. And then WUSC, which is World University Services of Canada, they have 2 roles. One is the overseas identification of students. And then the second role is that Canada has actually been doing a very similar program for the past 40 years. And they have been implementing that program. And so they are providing overall technical assistance and advice on the program. So why do we have this program? Why Welcome Corps on campus? So one of the main impetus for the program is that there are over 100 million displaced individuals worldwide. And the level of displacement no longer matches the accessible pathways that we have for refugees. And so we're really looking to expand the durable solutions or permanent pathways for refugees. We also know that accessing higher education for refugees is very challenging. So while 40% of the global population is able to access higher ed, only 7% of refugees do. Some of you might be familiar with the existing pathways for refugee students to access higher ed in the US specifically. So refugees can be resettled. We have a US refugee admissions program, and about 1% of refugees worldwide are resettled. So first, it's very challenging to be in a resettlement pathway statistically. But then once refugees arrive and are resettled in the US, there's a lot of pressure for economic self-sufficiency. And therefore, it can be very challenging for resettled refugees to access higher education. Refugees sometimes try to access the F1 international student visa. So these would be refugees who are overseas. That is very challenging for many reasons, one of which is you have to declare intent to return to your home country, which is challenging for a refugee. And then even when refugee students are able to access the international student visa, they're then without a permanent pathway. It's a non-immigrant status, and they would have to figure out a way to adjust status once they're here. We've also seen a lot of higher education institutions enroll students who have humanitarian parole. So this is most recently with Afghans, as well as Ukrainians. This is great. It's also not a permanent pathway, nor is it an education-specific pathway. So what's new? What does Welcome Corps on campus change about these barriers? So this is both a resettlement, so it's a refugee resettlement and an educational pathway. So students from overseas enter the US as a refugee, and that means they are on track for legal permanent residence. But they also are being resettled specifically on a college campus as a first-year student. And so they are being welcomed into campus communities and integrated into that community. Students are being identified overseas. So refugee students are applying to the program of Welcome Corps on campus for our first two cohorts, which is fall 2024 and fall 2025. Students are being identified and selected out of Kenya and Jordan. They must be between the ages of 18 to 24. They must be single with no dependents, have completed secondary school, be proficient in spoken and written English. And so these requirements, particularly the age and single no dependents, those might evolve over time to be more inclusive. But as we are in the initial phases of the program, we're focusing on that population. Kenya and Jordan have been identified for the first cohorts for a couple reasons. One is particularly in Kenya, the proficiency in English is much more prevalent, just because many of the students have lived their whole lives in camps or refugee settings in Kenya, and therefore they have completed primary and secondary school in English. We also have existing and sustainable partnerships in both Jordan and Kenya that allow us to recruit a diverse and inclusive pool of students. And also one of the key aspects of Welcome Corps and Welcome Corps on campus is that it has to be students have to be coming and individuals have to be in a country that allows them to exit for resettlement, right? And so Jordan and Kenya both allow for that exit. In terms of where the students are from, so those that are in Kenya are predominantly Congolese, South Sudanese, and Somali. In Jordan, we're looking at primarily Syrian students, inclusive of a smattering of others. So students are then placed with campuses based on academic and overall fit. And so IIE receives both the campus sponsor group application, which I'll talk about in a little bit, as well as the student application and interviews with the student, and kind of not only look at academic fit, but as well as overall cultural fit of the institution and the student. Just an important note, the final admissions decision lies with the institution. And so the admissions office ultimately can decide to accept or deny the student admissions. Students can enroll in associate's or bachelor's degrees. So this campus sponsor group that I've been talking about, so because this is a resettlement program and it's part of private sponsorship, every campus must form what we call a campus sponsor group. And this group is at least 5 individuals who are responsible for ensuring the support of the student during their first 12 months. As I said, it has to be at least 5 American citizens or lawful permanent residents. They must be over the age of 18. A group can have more than 5 members. And one of the keys we have around groups is really creating a group that represents a diverse cross-section of your campus, so that the student receives kind of holistic support, and that it has a primary contact or lead coordinator. Campus sponsor groups can include staff, faculty, students, alumni, community members, again, diverse cross-section. Again, because this is both a resettlement and an education pathway, the campus sponsor group is responsible for providing what we call core sponsorship services. And so these are kind of the basic resettlement services that refugees receive. And so the good thing about these is that campuses are amazing ecosystems, and a lot of these services exist in some form already on a campus. It's a matter of making sure the refugee can access all of these services, and also just making sure they're also accommodating to a refugee student and their unique needs. The higher education institution plays a critical role in Welcome Core on campus, and Welcome Core on campus cannot exist without institutional buy-in. So the higher education institution has to complete what's called a commitment form or commitment letter that outlines what it is willing to commit to for the refugee student. At a bare minimum, that means that the institution has to commit to admit one or more refugee students, but also the commitment form outlines the opportunity to provide additional financial supports. Maybe it's staffing supports from other offices or departments. Maybe it wants to commit funds, financial support, awareness raising, etc. In terms of fundraising, we have some fundraising tips that we'll send out in the follow-up email. I think one key thing to note is that because they're arriving as refugee students and refugees are deemed eligible non-citizens for federal financial aid. And so it's key to note that they are eligible for federal student aid with a family contribution of 0. So likely they will receive full Pell Grants. Depending on your state, you may be eligible, the student may be eligible for in-state tuition, very state dependent, or other state aid. And then campus groups have drawn upon lots of other creative or even clear-cut ways of fundraising to support bringing students to campus. Applications are open now. We have a fabulous mobilization team who you can see here that is here to support you in the mobilization efforts. And then we have our colleague Noor at ECAR who specifically can help you with the application process. And the applications are due September 15th of 2024 for students to arrive for fall 2025. And then that is my monologue on Welcome Core on campus. But beyond Welcome Core on campus, I also just wanted to share a little bit about this burgeoning ecosystem of organizations that are able to support with various ways that higher education is engaging in refugee resettlement. And so again, there's a number of organizations, and on our Refugee Resource Hub, we have kind of an outline of who's doing what to make this hopefully a little more clear. I also wanted to share about what we call SHARE, which is supporting higher education and refugee resettlement. And this is an initiative also by the State Department to enhance U.S. domestic capacity for refugee resettlement. And really it's about expanding higher ed engagement in refugee resettlement and helping you to identify what is the best pathway for you. And so we, as a consortium of SHARE, are here to kind of help talk to institutions about what resources do you have, what interests do you have, how can you engage in refugee resettlement in a way that is mutually beneficial for the campus? And is that Welcome Core on campus? Is that something else? How can we help you to identify the best pathway? Here are some of the pathways that we have readily available resources on. And so we are actively engaging with campuses to work on campus utilization, housing for non-student refugees, how can we engage in service learning and volunteer engagement and community engaged learning between higher ed and local refugee serving agencies, reducing barriers to refugee student enrollment, um, English language support and career pathways, access to vocational training, colleges and universities as employers of refugees, and then also kind of how to engage in research and evaluation. We have a refugee resource hub online that kind of outlines these various pathways for you and has some other resources as well. And so, for example, on the Refugee Resource Hub, if you look at educational opportunities for resettled refugees, it gives you kind of how to get started, and then it outlines some specific resources that might be helpful for you. Also, we have a directory of practitioners. And so it is a directory of folks operating at the intersection of higher education and refugee resettlement. And it's a mix of people both who wear a primary refugee serving organization hat, but work with higher ed, and also those who work in higher ed, but have ventured into engaging in refugee resettlement. So it's a really cool opportunity to connect. So I'm going to stop sharing and we are going to transition to a more relevant and specific conversation with Chris and Rendy at IU Bloomington. And so I just want to say I first met Chris 2 years ago, I think, at Acro, and was just blown away by the work that Indiana University Bloomington is doing. And then I actually had the pleasure of meeting Rendy earlier this year. And y'all just make me want to move to Indiana is really what this is. So we are gonna have a not quick, but I have some questions for you all about just to start. Can you tell us a little bit about IU Bloomington's work with refugees historically, and the work that you all have been doing?
Sure. Thanks, Laura. And I want to say, yay, Indiana. I'm so excited to see all the institutions that are here and would love to be a resource for you as you consider joining this venture. It's so rewarding. You just wouldn't believe it. So in 2019, a small group of us decided that we have the capability to do something about helping the world refugee issues. So we put together a proposal and the campus approved it. And our organization or our thought pattern is, as an academic institution, we have all the resources we need. We just need to approach them in an organized way. So we put together a steering committee of representatives from, and this is a small steering committee, Office of International Services, Financial Aid, Dean of Students, a faculty member, and academic support, and domestic and international admissions. And then we sort of began to set our path, but we created a larger task force throughout the university of point people in all of the service offices. So, career services and academic advising and the bursar's office. It's anything we could think of that an international student may need. Counseling services as well. And then we gave them a little bit of intercultural training on, trauma advising, and some just general intercultural issues. And they agreed to serve as point people to help the refugee students. And so a refugee can go to our website and say, I want to talk to someone about career advising. They'll go to the one person that's been trained, and that person will then not make them tell their story again, because that can be traumatic for students. Be aware of some of the issues that they're experiencing, like never having done a resume before, and really get them started on the right path. So we now are directly sponsoring 14 refugee students. And then we're adding about 10 more starting this fall, including 2 from the Welcome Core program. So we're very excited. The goal is to get to up to 40 and maintain that, but we're not quite there yet.
I'm here for the 40. I'm ready. Awesome. And then can you tell a little bit about, because you already are engaging in this work, what was it about Welcome Core on campus? Why apply and decide to participate in Welcome Core?
I think, I mean, we're very tuned into the fact that there are only a limited number of resettlement agencies in the U.S. and they just can't handle the volume that we need to handle in order to meet the UN goal of the 15 by 30. So we wanted to be a part of that. We're interested in the new challenge of actually, serving as resettlement as well as an academic institution. We wanted to increase the diversity of our international students because, we started with Afghans and they have a lot of friends and relatives and word of mouth. And so we were a little Afghan heavy and thought, well, there's more than Afghans out there. So diversity is important. And then also with the pre-screening that's done by all the agencies that Laura admitted and the help with the, making sure they go through everything they need to get out of their home country and fly here was just sort of too good to pass up.
Awesome. So you're making it sound very rosy and easy. But I have a feeling there was probably some challenges and barriers. Can you share a little bit about kind of what were some of the roadblocks?
Sure. First of all, people on campus are, I mean, you mentioned refugees and they say, how can I help? But then when you ask them for money, not as many say, how can I help, right? So it's, getting a variety of funding sources. And then it is a little intimidating when you apply for the Welcome Core program. It's a long application form. There's quite a long training that you
We
go
made
through.
it shorter. Just
Oh, good,
just
good. Thank you.
get excited, Rendy. Next year's is
Okay. um, yeah, I made the mistake of trying to get it all done in a week, and that wasn't very bright, right before Thanksgiving. But we did it. But we did even have a little bit of reluctance from members of our committee as they read what the requirements were. They're like, can we really do this? But if you break down that long list of responsibilities that Laura put that you have to do, she's right. Many of them are things that we're equipped to do as a campus anyway. So if you're already working with refugees, much like you are any other student with some sensitivities, then there's only a few added responsibilities. And you get, when you do the Welcome USA program, you've got a kind of a oversight agency that helps you when they're going to send us reminders of when we have to do things and be able to answer questions for any resource we need. So it's a little scary. It is a heavy responsibility to make sure that you are adhering to all the regulations in a culturally sensitive way. But I can go on for hours about the positive experiences we've had with the refugees, and we've got our first 4 refugees are graduating in 2 weeks.
Yay.
One of them has a 6-figure job offer. So the value of education. And we've been really impressed with most of their academic preparation and success. So I don't want to make, it is like herding cats, that they're very independent. Many of them are slow to trust for obvious reasons. And, sometimes they'll go off and do something and I learn about it later. I'm like, you did what? Like the student that went to Canada without telling me and then suddenly couldn't get back. So, they're I like the challenge, but they are challenging.
Awesome. And Chris, can you talk a little bit about like if someone's not in admissions or even if they are in admissions, what are some of the potential concerns that admissions has around refugee students? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say just Welcome Core makes it pretty easy. As you said, a lot of students are growing up in a camp in Kenya, so they're taking that KCSE, the Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education. So pretty clear cut, straightforward. They have the English instruction. So the admissions piece for these Welcome Core students, from our experience so far, has been pretty streamlined, straightforward, meeting standards or not. So just for this specific program, it's been great. Easy to get them through, prioritize that application. In a broader sense, if you're working with a more diverse population of displaced students, each case is very much unique. They could have left their home country, not thought, hey, I need to grab transcripts, because who would do that? So you could have students who have nothing. You could have students who have photocopies of their documents. They could have partial documents, which tends to be the most common. They have the majority, they'll have their degree, but not transcripts, for example. So from an admission standpoint, it's really important to, in a sensitive way, just figure out what they do have versus what they don't have. Utilize resources in the field to verify what they've completed or not. We've also been successful in engaging our faculty to do like interviews to kind of fill in those gaps where the student can show that they have completed a certain level by talking with faculty, going over curriculum content. So even if we don't have a transcript showing it, they've demonstrated to faculty that they are at a certain level. So we can go off that information, but it's really about being adhering to institutional standards, but being flexible and being willing to look at new avenues to meet those standards. So we're all still doing our jobs, but we're still helping the students where they're at to get to those standards and get to that point of admission. So I would just stress it's very much case by case unique, and just be willing to be flexible while still upholding those standards.
Awesome. Um, you both alluded to this a little bit, but can you share a little bit more about what you see as the benefits to a campus for engaging in refugee resettlement, in Welcome Core on campus, enrolling refugee students?
For me, it's the diversity. We have the guy that's going to be making six figures is the darling of his classes because he's taking international development. And his professors love him because he gives real world examples. That's the course he fondly tells me he got an A+ in. But I think it's also very affirming. These students are so grateful for this educational opportunity. I have two brothers from the Congo, we call them the Congo boys, who have been out of school for 8 years. They finished high school and then went into the camps. And we had to explain everything to them. You know, what's a semester? What's a major? What's a credit hour? How does it all come together? And then we started talking about offices that could help them. And they're like, it's like Disney World here. Everything we could ever want is right here. And you know, every administrator they go to see, they're like, this is fantastic. And to get that kind of feedback, we don't get that from domestic students, right? It's just the way things are. But to see these students succeed and hear their appreciation is just one of the most affirming experiences I've had in a work environment.
Yeah, I'll add to that too a bit. So one of our first students, I think within a couple weeks, Rindy, he had already met with the provost at a soccer match. So had already been interacting with administration, and I don't think Rindy and I can claim that. And then just being out in the community, and they're at a restaurant, and knowing that they found like their own community within Bloomington. It's a small city, but just seeing them integrate on their own, like we provide guidance, we provide support, but they're doing a lot of it on their own, and they're finding their own way, and just helping them get to that point where they are independent, they can kind of go towards their goals, I think is makes me feel like it's worth it. And it just shows that they're in their own way, each individual way, contributing to the community, contributing to their own path, and all of that's just kind of integrating and just proceeding.
And they're great cooks, and they invite you to dinner on a regular basis.
So this isn't good diet plan, is what you're saying.
Right.
Awesome. What what tips or recommendations would you have for campuses who are interested in participating in Welcome Corps or any engagement or initiatives around refugees and refugee students?
Want to start that one, Chris?
Yeah, sure. I guess my first one would be just kind of a cautionary. At the beginning, I mean, there were headline news, new refugees, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria. So that kind of, I mean, admittedly, that got Rindy and I started on this and wanting to start. And there were a lot of people around us. And then as those headlines kind of trail off, people kind of disappear. So it's really good to be excited about it, want to do the work, but it's important to acknowledge how much work it will be and how much work it takes to put into this. It's going to be more than just a regular cohort of students. And I think we all owe it to the students to make sure we finish what we promise. So from the beginning, just understand the amount of work it takes, how to achieve those goals that we're setting for ourselves, and making sure that it is delivered to the students. Even where Rindy and I have been talking about after our students graduate, connecting them to the alumni network. So it's not really something that ends. We don't have a cohort. It's going to be something that they're continually involved in the community as long as they want to, and then engaging them to give back to the next generation. So it's more than just getting a student on campus. It is much broader than that and just continues on as far as the support.
I think patience is important. They're sometimes slow getting materials to you. They they may walk in the door at 4:30 because they don't have a concept of, how much what our work day is as much, and so or they'll beg you to come and have dinner with them on a Saturday when really all you want to do is watch a ball game. Uh, so you're I see the question, are they more needy than F1 students? In some respects, yes, but not all of them. Some of our students have already had 1 or 2 years of college prep, and they just take off. And we're here sort of providing a safety net if they need it, but it's some of them, like I said, it's been amazing how independent they are. Others, like the Congo boys, are at the beginning of their studies this January, they were in my office every other day. And I'm like, could you just email me your questions and then I can answer them? But their way is to go and talk to you. So we've learned how to negotiate that and more, gently get them to email once in a while. My gosh, now they're trying to get their sister here. I mean, she's in the States. They're trying to get her enrolled in college. And so now we're back to every other day about how we can get the sister here. So it's a little more work than a standard F1 student, but not for every single refugee that you come in. You just have to sort of be ready for it.
Thank you. And I will say one of the advantages of the Welcome Corps on Campus program is that because of the refugee processing time, that's why you're applying in September for fall 2025, and the students actually for the fall 2025 cohort are already almost decided. They're in the very final selection phase because those students need to get into the immigration processing timeline. And so the good news about that is that means WUSC, our overseas partner, has over a year to do academic prep with those students. So they will be doing digital literacy and, American University 101. So they'll come in with a little bit more context and understanding and prep than maybe other students. Well, I am extremely, extremely grateful for Indiana University Bloomington for being the first Welcome Core on campus in Indiana. But I am super grateful to Patchwork Indy and all of you as Indiana institutions for being interested and excited about how you can engage in refugee resettlement and Welcome Core on campus, and excited to see this cohort of Indiana universities participating grow. And I'm going to hand it to Claire to close us out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Chris and Rendy, for sharing just your personal experience. Again, we're so proud to have you as an Indiana higher education institution really leading on this program. And everyone, thank you from all corners of the state for joining. Patchwork is working not just to mobilize around the Welcome Core on Campus program, but we have broader initiatives around engaging refugee and immigrant students of diverse backgrounds across the state. And so we would love to connect with you further. I would also love to put a little bit of a plug in. This June. We are hosting the National Welcome Core on Campus teams to Indiana for a mini tour of the Hoosier Heartland, as we're saying, or an Indiana roadshow. And so we will have guests doing stops in Indianapolis, Bloomington, Muncie, Fort Wayne, and elsewhere. If you're interested in engaging with us, please reach out. But we're looking between June 11th to the 22nd, and so we'll be in touch soon with more dates, specifics. And again, please reach out, connect. We'll be following up with more information and resources. But we wanted this to be a good conversation about our great higher education institutions engaging in how we can support refugees. So hopefully this is the first conversation of many more to come. Thank you all for your time.